Welcome to this deep dive. This is the space where we explore timeless philosophy, deeper meaning, and the actual ideas that shape how you understand the world.
hmm
And usually, like when we walk into a physical space, we just immediately sense whether it was designed or if it just sort of, evolved through blind natural processes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You feel it right away.
Right. Like if you wander into a dense, old growth forest, I mean, it is undeniably beautiful, but it operates on the principles of organic chaos, you know?
Yeah, it's just wild competition.
Exactly. You're navigating around fallen logs, you push through tangled underbrush, and you're just observing 1,000 different biological imperatives all competing for sunlight and soil. It is totally wild.
Right, it's entropy and growth just kind of constantly clashing.
But then if you step out of that forest and into, say, a massive centuries-old Gothic cathedral, the autonomic response in your nervous system shifts entirely.
Oh, completely. It's a totally different physical reaction.
Your eyes are instantly drawn up the sheer verticality of those stone pillars to the vaulted ceilings. You notice the stained glass capturing the afternoon light at these impossibly precise angles, refracting it across the nave.
Mm.
Even the acoustic resonance of your own footsteps changes. You just instantly know that every single stone, every mortar joint, every flying buttress was placed there with intention. By a mind.
By a mind, yes.
So today we are continuing our journey through Albert Pike's magnum opus, Morals and Dogma, and we are looking for that mind.
We're definitely looking for the mind today.
We're moving from the previous chapter's focus on terrestrial leadership and service, and we're zooming all the way out to the cosmological scale to tackle Chapter 12, the Grand Master Architect. So, okay, let's unpack this.
A big one to unpack.
It really is, because to grapple with this specific chapter, we are confronting the ultimate teleological question for the listener. Is the universe an overgrown, chaotic forest of random atomic collisions? Or is it a cathedral of unimaginable scale, designed with a deliberate, underlying purpose?
And, to even begin addressing that, we really have to look at the specific intellectual and historical environment from which this text actually emerged.
Right, because context is everything here.
Exactly. When Albert Pike published Morals and Dogma in 1871, he wasn't just writing a rule book for a fraternity. He was attempting this massive, almost unbelievable synthesis of global philosophical traditions.
Like tying everything together.
Yeah, he was pulling from Hermeticism, Kabbalah, ancient mystery schools, Zoroastrianism, and he was deliberately marrying them to Enlightenment rationality.
Wow, that is a heavy mix.
It is. So when he introduces the central symbol of this chapter, the great architect of the universe, he is doing something very, very specific.
Okay, what is he doing?
He is absolutely not presenting a dogmatic anthropomorphic deity just, sitting on a cloud with a compass.
Right, not the old man with a beard in the sky.
Exactly. He is presenting an ontological framework. The great architect is a symbol for the organizing intelligence, the logos, that underlying structural imperative that prevents reality from just dissolving into pure entropy.
That distinction is it's paramount for the listener to grasp right up front.
It really is.
Because the text explicitly warns against turning the great architect into this static idol of blind belief. Instead, Pike treats this symbol as almost like a cognitive wedge, right?
Yes, a cognitive wedge is a great way to put it.
It's an invitation to shift your perspective from being a passive consumer of reality to becoming an active, relentless investigator. Because if there is an architect, there must be a blueprint.
Right.
And if there is a blueprint, our primary duty is to learn how to read it.
What's fascinating here is how Pike completely anticipates the resistance to this idea. He knows the pushback he's going to get.
Oh, sure.
Because he knows that to the untrained eye, human history and the natural world often look horrific, random, and just deeply chaotic.
I mean, you watch the evening news and chaos is the first word that comes to mind.
Exactly. But to reconcile this, the text argues that we must recognize the limits of our own perception. We are observing a multi-billion-year construction project, but we only live for about 80 years.
We're just a blip.
Right. We're stepping into the absolute middle of the process.
Think about this. Think about walking into a master carpenter's workshop in the middle of a massive commission.
Oh, I love this analogy.
Right. To an outsider with no background in woodworking whatsoever, the space just looks like a disaster.
It's a total mess.
Exactly. There are chisels scattered across the workbench. There are piles of sawdust on the floor. You've got half-cut planks of mahogany leaning against the walls, and the deafening shriek of a table saw tearing through wood. It looks and sounds like pure chaos.
To the untrained eye, yeah.
But to the master carpenter, every single element in that room is exactly where it needs to be for that specific millisecond of the project's timeline. The chaos is an illusion born entirely of the visitor's ignorance regarding the sequence of construction.
Yes. So my question to you, and really to the listener, is this. Does the universe only look chaotic to us, like that random forest, because we haven't learned to read the blueprint yet?
That analogy cuts right to the absolute core of Pike's argument in Chapter 12.
Really?
Yeah. The uninitiated mind observes the scattered tools and assumes a lack of intention. But the Grandmaster Architect, which we should clarify, represents the elevated state of consciousness the reader is meant to achieve. That elevated mind looks at the exact same scattered tools and deduces the final product.
Okay, so it's a shift in how you process the data.
Exactly. The text demands that we stop viewing the universe as a series of just fortunate accidents and start looking for the structural laws that govern the so-called chaos.
And where does he tell us to look?
He points directly to the observable patterns in the natural world. He's talking about mathematical precision, immutable natural laws, and the dynamic equilibrium of opposing forces.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because I want to focus heavily on that concept of mathematical precision.
Let's do it. Because we aren't talking about basic arithmetic here, like counting sheep. The text gestures toward the deep structural math of the cosmos. And that brings up an immediate friction point for modern scientific philosophy. Let's play devil's advocate for a second.
Please do.
Evolutionary psychology and cognitive science, right? They tell us that the human brain is essentially this biological prediction engine.
Mm-hmm.
We survived on the African savanna by developing hyperactive pattern recognition. The early hominid who sees a pattern in the rustling grass and assumes it's a leopard survives even if it was just the wind.
Better safe than sorry, right?
Exactly. We are hardwired for apophenia, that tendency to perceive meaningful connections in unrelated random data.
Right, seeing faces in the clouds.
Yes. So consider the possibility that when we look up at the cosmos and see the Fibonacci sequence in a spiral galaxy, or when we marvel at the precise calibration of celestial mechanics, are we actually observing a grand intentional design? Or are we just imposing our own mammalian desire for order onto a cold, dead, random universe? Are we just hallucinating the blueprint?
This raises an important question, and it's honestly the primary modern rebuttal to the whole teleological argument.
Right. Are we making it up?
Are we imposing order, or are we discovering it? But if we look really closely at the nature of the mathematics Pike is referencing and the math that modern physics uses today, the apophenia argument, the whole faces in the clouds thing, it actually begins to buckle under its own weight.
How so?
Because we aren't just talking about visually recognizing a spiral shape. We are talking about the fact that theoretical mathematics equations spun purely out of the abstract logic of the human mind consistently end up predicting the physical behavior of the universe decades or even centuries before we had the technology to actually observe it.
Wait, like what? Give me an example.
Well, think about Einstein's general relativity predicting gravitational waves in 1916. We couldn't actually observe them until 2015. 100 years later, the math knew what the universe was doing before our instruments did. Eugene Wigner, the physicist, famously called this the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics.
Oh, wow. So if I'm tracking this logic, you're saying that if our brains only evolved math as a localized survival tool, just to, like, count apples and evade predators on Earth,
Right.
there is absolutely no evolutionary reason why that same localized tool should be able to perfectly map the behavior of quantum fields or the curvature of space-time across the universe.
Exactly. It's the exact opposite of a psychological projection. The math is structural. It's built into the house. We discover the mathematical constants like the speed of light, the fine structure constant, the gravitational constant. We do not invent them just to make ourselves feel safer.
They exist independently of us.
Completely. If you change the strong nuclear force by even a fraction of a percent, stars literally cannot produce carbon, and biological life becomes entirely impossible.
That is mind-blowing.
Now, obviously, Pike's philosophical framework in 1871 didn't have the vocabulary of modern astrophysics or quantum mechanics.
Sure, he didn't know about the strong nuclear force.
No, but the esoteric principle he outlines is identical. The universe operates on verifiable, immutable laws that demonstrate an engineered stability. Nature operates through a dynamic balance, positive and negative, expansion and contraction, severity and mercy.
That sounds like a lot of the mystical traditions he was pulling from.
It is, in Kabbalistic terms, which heavily influenced this specific chapter. This is the balance of the Sephirot on the Tree of Life. The universe is intelligible. It can be understood.
And the fact that we can understand it is the key, right?
Yes. The sheer fact that our minds can comprehend the math governing a quasar billions of light years away suggests a profound ontological resonance between the human intellect and the intelligence that structured the cosmos.
That is a staggering realization. The blueprint is written in a language, and against all probability, we possess the neurocognitive architecture to read it, which completely disrupts the modern nihilistic view of humanity as just some cosmic accident. If the universe is structured by this grand creative intelligence, and our minds are tuned to comprehend it, then humanity is not just a passive observer sitting in the audience of the universe.
No, not at all.
We are active participants. We are localized expressions of it.
And this is exactly where the text moves from cosmology into profound humanism. It brings it right down to us. This is where we explore the concept of the human as the builder.
Right.
Pike asserts that human creativity is not just some quirky, accidental byproduct of evolution. It is a direct reflection of a higher universal principle. In the Hermetic tradition, the famous maxim is, as above, so below.
The macrocosm is reflected in the microcosm.
Exactly. We create because we are part of a creative system.
Here's where it gets really interesting, I think, for the listener's everyday life, because this completely reframes everything we consider mundane labor.
Oh, it changes everything about how you view your work.
If you look at the core Masonic allegory that Pike is working with, it revolves around the transition from operative masonry to speculative masonry.
Right.
Operative masonry is the literal physical act of taking raw stone, the rough ashlar, as they call it,
The unworked stone.
and using physical tools to shape it into a perfect ashlar, a perfectly squared stone that can bear the weight of a cathedral wall.
That's the physical building part.
But speculative masonry, which is what Pike is detailing here, takes that physical act and turns it into a psychological and spiritual imperative. We are supposed to take the rough ashlar of our own, our animalistic nature, our chaotic impulses, and chisel it into a refined intellect and a moral character.
And that internal imperative naturally extends outward into everything we create in the physical world.
How do you mean?
Well, Pike suggests that our drive to build, whether it's actual architecture or legal frameworks or even art, is a microcosmic reflection of the macrocosmic architect. When human beings take raw, chaotic materials and apply intellect, will, and design to them, they are functioning as microarchitects.
Okay, I see.
We are acting as localized anti-entropy machines. The universe naturally tends toward disorder, but human consciousness actively opposes that decay by building structures.
Think about the scale of that idea. It means that when humanity constructs a skyscraper, or when we draft a complex legal framework like a constitution to govern a society.
Or a composer writing a symphony pulling harmony out of silence.
Yes,
Yeah.
we are directly emulating the universal design.
Yeah.
But I really want to push this down to the individual level. I want to ask the listener directly, because it's easy to abstract this into the grand achievements of human history, like the U.S. Constitution or Beethoven.
Right, the monumental stuff.
But let's look at your Tuesday afternoon. What are you building in your life right now? When you sit down and write a clean, elegant piece of code that optimizes a software system, you are imposing order on chaos.
Absolutely.
When you go into your backyard and you design a garden, deliberately placing the nitrogen-fixing plants right next to the heavy feeders to create this balanced micro-ecosystem.
You are functioning as the grand master architect of that specific space.
Exactly. Even something as simple as organizing your week to balance your responsibilities, you are taking the raw, chaotic material of time and shaping it with intention. It mirrors the larger systems around you.
It fundamentally alters the philosophy of work. Work is no longer just a mechanism for economic survival, It is the physical manifestation of a spiritual duty,
It gives profound dignity to the act of creation.
regardless of the scale. But, and this is crucial, to achieve that dignity, to build something that actually lasts and harmonizes with the greater universal laws, you cannot just wildly swing a hammer around.
No, you'll just break things.
Right. A builder needs highly calibrated tools. And this is where Pike introduces what we can call the toolkit of the mind.
Right, because if our minds are meant to mirror universal creation, a flawed mirror will produce a distorted reflection. We have to calibrate the instrument. So, what does this all mean? I think this is where the text heavily subverts a lot of modern expectations. Because when people approach a 19th century esoteric text that's just steeped in ritual and allegory, the assumption is usually that it will demand mystical devotion.
Oh, yeah. People think it's going to say, just close your eyes, have faith, and accept the mystery.
Exactly. Don't ask questions. But Chapter 12 emphatically rejects that. It explicitly states that true understanding does not come from blind belief. It demands rigorous observation, reason, and empirical inquiry.
Pike is incredibly aggressive on this point, actually. He viewed blind dogma as a literal form of intellectual tyranny.
Wow, tyranny.
Yes. To him, if the great architect endowed humanity with the faculties of logic, reason, and critical analysis, then to just abandon those faculties in favor of unquestioning faith is a direct insult to the design itself.
It's like being given a Ferrari and just leaving it in the garage.
Exactly. In the allegory of the Grand Master Architect, reason and observation are the literal measuring tools of the mind.
So we see the physical tools of the Mason, the plumb line, the level, the square, transformed into these cognitive requirements.
Precisely. Let's look at the actual mechanics of those metaphors because they're brilliant. A physical builder uses a plumb line, which is just a weight suspended on a string, to ensure that a wall is perfectly vertical, perfectly aligned with the center of gravity.
Right.
If the wall is off plumb, even by a little bit, it will eventually collapse under its own weight.
Gravity always wins.
Always. So in Pike's speculative masonry, reason and empirical observation are your psychological plumb line. You use them to constantly check your beliefs against the objective reality of the universe.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Right. If you build a worldview or a societal structure that ignores the laws of human nature or physical reality, if your philosophy is off plumb, it will inevitably collapse.
And what about the square and the level?
The square represents morality and fairness, ensuring your actions form perfect, harmonious angles with your fellow human beings. And the level ensures that despite our different societal roles or wealth, we recognize our fundamental equality in the eyes of the architect.
So this esoteric system is profoundly rational. It elevates curiosity from just a personality trait to a moral virtue.
Yes, curiosity is a requirement.
It tells the initiate, do not take my word for it. Go measure the universe yourself. It demands that you study history, physics, biology, psychology. The Grandmaster Architect is relentlessly curious, not just to exploit the natural world for resources, but to actually reverse engineer the mind of the designer.
And once you begin that process of relentless measurement and observation, you generate a massive amount of data about reality.
Right, you get flooded with information.
Exactly. So the challenge then becomes epistemological. How do we categorize and integrate all of this knowledge?
Where does it all go?
Pike provides a framework for this. He argues that the pursuit of ultimate truth requires three distinct but interlocked disciplines: science, philosophy, and spirituality. The text treats these as a triumvirate.
This might be the most vital lesson for the modern intellectual landscape.
I completely agree.
Because we currently live in a paradigm that forces a violent divorce between these disciplines. We are told all the time that you must pick a team.
Yep, you have to choose sides.
You are either a materialist who believes only in the cold, hard data of the scientific method, viewing spirituality as just a primitive psychological crutch.
Right.
Or you are a deeply spiritual person who views the rigid materialism of science as soulless and reductive. We've built these massive, heavily fortified walls between these departments of human thought.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture Pike is drawing, those walls are the exact reason modern society feels so fractured and devoid of unified meaning.
It's a broken system.
Pike argues that treating science and spirituality as competing frameworks is a profound category error. They're complementary lenses. Think of them as a three-legged stool.
Okay.
If you remove any one of those legs, the entire structure of truth just collapses. Science, philosophy, and spirituality each govern a specific, absolutely necessary domain of reality.
Let's break down the mechanics of how these three actually interact in this esoteric framework, rather than just kind of listing what they are.
Sure. Let's start with science.
Okay, science is the observation and measurement of the blueprint in action. It maps the mechanics. It tells us the sequence of the human genome, the thermodynamics of a combustion engine, the exact wavelength of ultraviolet light. It is entirely concerned with the how.
Yes, science gathers the raw data of the great architect's physical execution. But science, by its own necessary methodological constraints, is entirely silent on the question of meaning.
Right.
You cannot put justice, beauty, or purpose into a centrifuge and measure its mass.
No, you can't.
That is exactly where the second leg of the stool philosophy must take over. Philosophy takes the raw data, mapped by science, and applies human logic to it.
Give me an example of that.
Well, it asks, based on what science tells us about human biology and the scarcity of natural resources, what is the most ethical way to govern a society? How do we define a good life given our biological constraints? Philosophy extracts the logic of the design.
Okay, but here's the deeper question. I can formulate the argument a modern skeptic would make right now.
Let's hear it.
They'd say, fine, science gives us facts, philosophy gives us ethics. Why do we need spirituality at all?
Yes.
You hear this constantly in the God of the Gaps debate. The argument is that spirituality and religion were only invented to explain natural phenomena we didn't understand yet. Like early humans thought thunder was the anger of the gods.
Right, because they didn't know about atmospheric pressure and static discharge.
Exactly. And so, as science advances and fills in those gaps of knowledge, the domain of spirituality shrinks and shrinks until it eventually disappears entirely. So, in Pike's framework, does spirituality simply fill in the gaps of what we don't know yet? Or is it the glue holding the other two together? Is it something structurally different?
The text fundamentally rejects the whole God of the Gaps premise. In the paradigm of the Grandmaster Architect, spirituality is not the domain of ignorance. It is the domain of the axioms.
The axioms. What do you mean by that?
What I mean is, science operates on foundational axioms it literally cannot prove. Science assumes that the universe is intelligible. It assumes that logic is valid. It assumes that truth is preferable to falsehood.
Right.
Science cannot prove why truth is better than falsehood using the scientific method. It simply has to adopt it as a given to even function. Spirituality, in this esoteric sense, is the intuitive, transcendent realization of why those axioms exist in the first place.
Take that a step further. How does that look in practice, in everyday experience?
Let's use the analogy of a masterfully composed symphony, say Beethoven's Ninth. Science can analyze that symphony perfectly by measuring the exact acoustic frequencies, the tension of the violin strings, the decibel level of the brass section.
It gives you all the acoustic data.
Exactly. Then philosophy can analyze the symphony by discussing Beethoven's historical context, the mathematical structure of the counterpoint, the cultural themes of the Enlightenment it represents.
Okay, so we have the mechanics and the context.
Right. But neither the acoustic data from science nor the historical analysis from philosophy can explain the visceral, transcendent weepiness you feel in your chest when the orchestra hits the crescendo.
Wow. Yeah.
That subjective, internal experience of connecting with the beauty of the music. That is the domain of spirituality. Science maps the territory. Philosophy interprets the map. But spirituality is the actual experience of walking the landscape and feeling the earth beneath your feet.
That is a beautiful way to put it.
They are simultaneous nested realities, not competing theories.
So even if theoretical physics one day delivers a perfect, unified theory of everything that maps 100% of the universe's mechanics, the need for philosophy to find meaning and spirituality to experience connection to that meaning remains completely untouched. You cannot reduce a sonata to its acoustic friction without losing the music entirely.
Precisely. You lose the soul of it. And a true Grandmaster Architect utilizes all three tools simultaneously. They use science to ensure their building won't collapse, philosophy to ensure the building serves a just purpose, and spirituality to ensure the building actually elevates the human soul.
But, I mean, integrating those three massive fields of human thought science, philosophy, spirituality, that requires a cognitive stamina that most people simply do not possess.
It's incredibly difficult.
It is incredibly uncomfortable to hold the rigidity of empirical science and the fluidity of spiritual intuition in your head at the exact same time. It requires a very specific psychological profile, which leads us to section 6 of our outline. The endless quest for higher understanding.
The search itself.
Yes.
Yeah.
The Grandmaster Architect is defined by a relentless, almost painful refusal to accept easy answers. He is never satisfied with surface-level explanations.
It is a state of perpetual intellectual motion. The text explicitly outlines the virtues required for this state: immense patience, unyielding curiosity, and absolute openness.
Openness is key here.
It is. And we really need to contrast our concept of openness with the concept of dogma, because they are mortal enemies in Pike's philosophy.
Mortal enemies.
Dogma is the assertion that the search is permanently over. It is the arrogant claim that an institution or an individual has somehow captured the absolute totality of the great architect's blueprint, codified it into a single book or a rigid set of rules, and no further questioning is permitted.
Dogma is the death of curiosity.
Exactly. True understanding requires the profound humility to recognize that a finite human mind can never, ever entirely enclose an infinite universal intelligence. Therefore, there is always a broader perspective to attain. The knowledge we have today is merely the scaffolding for the knowledge we will discover tomorrow.
To visualize this for you, the listener, forget the old cliche of climbing a mountain and reaching the peak. Because when you reach the summit, the journey is over.
Right, you just walk back down.
Instead, let's look at this through the lens of fractal geometry, specifically the Mandelbrot set.
Oh, perfect analogy.
The Mandelbrot set is a mathematical object, an equation. When you look at a visual representation of it on a computer screen, it looks like a complex, beautiful bug-like shape. But the defining feature of a fractal is that as you zoom into its boundary, the complexity never resolves into a simple flat line.
It just keeps going.
You can zoom in 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, 1,000,000,000 times, and it will continuously spawn infinite, perfect, impossibly complex replicas of itself, spiraling endlessly inward. There is no bottom to reach.
Never.
Dogma looks at the initial shape from the outside and says, "We've seen the whole thing, stop zooming." The Grandmaster Architect, armed with openness, realizes that the act of zooming is the reality. Knowledge is fractal. Every time science answers one question, it generates 3 exponentially more complex questions.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. The acquisition of knowledge does not reduce the mystery of the universe, it magnifies it. The deeper you go into quantum mechanics, the weirder and more miraculous it becomes. The deeper you go into the philosophical implications of consciousness, the more profound the mystery grows. Pike's concept of eternal progression assures the initiate that they will never reach the final secret of the universe.
The journey never ends.
No, the grand secret is the method of progression. The joy, the ultimate purpose, is found in the eternal unfolding of discovery.
But this introduces a massive existential weight.
It does.
If the universe is infinitely deep, and the search for understanding is this endless fractal, does the grand design actually care about the individual?
That is the big question.
We are here for perhaps 80 years. We are a microscopic blip on a cosmic timeline that stretches across billions of years. It's very easy to look at the infinite scale of the great architect's blueprint and feel completely crushed by it.
Oh, absolutely. It can make you feel entirely insignificant.
It can induce a deep sense of ontological nihilism. That belief that because we are so small and the universe is so vast, absolutely nothing we do matters. But Chapter 12 takes that exact premise and logically inverts it to arrive at a philosophical climax of the text.
This is exactly where esoteric philosophy meets practical human agency.
Yeah.
The logic Pike employs here is airtight. Design inherently requires intent.
Okay, unpack that.
You do not design a complex, mathematically precise system by accident. You design it to perform a function. If the universe is the result of an intentional design, a grand architect, then the biological and conscious life that arises within that universe is also intentional.
So we are an accident.
No, you are not a cosmic accident spawned by random mutations in a meaningless void. Therefore, nihilism is mathematically and logically incompatible with the perspective of the Grandmaster Architect.
So if I follow this to its ultimate endpoint, Pike is essentially arguing that if the blueprint exists, every single gear, every single pulley, every single consciousness within that system has a designated function.
Yes.
If the whole machine has a purpose, the individual parts cannot be purposeless.
That aligns perfectly with the text. The phrase we really must focus on is this: life is not meaningless. Actions matter.
Actions matter.
Yes. In a randomly generated chaotic universe, your actions have no ultimate weight. They were just the temporary friction of atoms before the inevitable heat death of the universe.
Leak.
Very. But in a designed, intentional universe, your actions are the localized expressions of a purposeful system.
Which means your choices possess tremendous architectural weight.
Yes, they do.
It brings an awe-inspiring, almost terrifying gravity to our daily lives. If you are an intentional piece of a design system, you have a specific structural role to play. And if you default on that role, if you abandon your purpose, succumb to apathy, or act with cruelty, you are shifting a structural load onto the rest of the system. You are literally weakening the cathedral wall.
It is the ultimate antidote to existential dread, but it replaces it with a staggering responsibility.
It really does.
It means that the integrity with which you conduct your business, the honesty with which you pursue truth, the compassion you show to your family, these are not just isolated personal lifestyle choices. They are ontological contributions to the great work. They're literally the perfectly squared stones being placed into the ongoing construction of reality.
It fundamentally changes how you view yourself. It takes the overwhelming, crushing scale of the cosmos, and instead of making you feel insignificant, it makes you feel structurally essential. It validates the struggle of existence.
Hmm.
Let's synthesize the immense philosophical territory we've navigated today.
Covered a lot of ground.
We really did. We started by looking at the physical universe and recognizing that it operates on mathematical precision and immutable constants, a blueprint that heavily implies the intelligence of a great architect.
Right. And then we examined how human creativity, our deep drive to build structures and systems, is not an evolutionary accident, but a microcosm of that universal design. We are localized builders.
We established that to build accurately, we must reject blind dogma and calibrate our minds using the tools of reason, empirical observation, and critical inquiry. We saw how a complete unbroken map of reality requires the integration of science to explain the mechanics, philosophy to extract the logic, and spirituality to experience the transcendent purpose.
The three-legged stool.
Exactly. And finally, we realized that acknowledging this grand design obliterates nihilism, granting our individual lives and our everyday choices an undeniable structural importance within the universe.
It gives life immense purpose.
This text is a profound demand for your active, conscious participation in reality. Now, in our next session, we are going to continue this esoteric journey by exploring the Royal Arch of Solomon.
Oh, that's a fantastic chapter.
It is. We will be diving into the mechanisms of hidden knowledge, the psychological thrill of discovery, and how the architectural theories we've dissected today are practically applied to the pursuit of ultimate truth.
I can't wait.
But before we close this chapter, the source text really demands introspection. And so I want to pose a few questions directly to you, the listener, to reflect on in your own time.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at the trajectory of your own life, do you only see the chaotic, tangled underbrush of a wild forest? Or can you begin to recognize the hidden, load-bearing walls of a designed structure? What specific recurring patterns are asking for your attention right now? And how does your personal understanding of this universal blueprint alter the way you treat the people around you?
How you answer those questions will dictate the blueprint of your own mind.
I want to leave you with one final thought to process. If humanity truly is the localized mirror of the great architect, and if our highest purpose is found within the disciplined act of creation, then the ultimate question isn't just about determining what the universe is made of. The question is, what are you choosing to build with your intellect, your energy, and your time today? Think back to the physical spaces we discussed at the very beginning. Your life, your legacy, is the architectural space you are actively constructing for others to inhabit once you are gone. When the people you love walk into the space you leave behind, will they be forced to navigate the random, chaotic debris of an unplanned life? Or will they feel the intentional, awe-inspiring resonance of a cathedral?
That's the choice we all have to make.
Observe carefully, think deeply, and remember. The more accurately you understand the design, the more clearly you will see your essential place